I'm good. How many of us have ever said that hiding behind those words, a world of pain and hurt? How many of us have ever said, I'm good, while simultaneously sweeping under the rug all of the things we don't want people in our outside world to know exists inside of us because we want so desperately for that outside world to keep existing, and that pain inside feels like such a threat to that? How many of us have ever felt that way before? It's probably more than you think. It's probably more than you think. You know, we show a video like that, and I say things like this, not in any way to shame or to call out or to make anybody feel like, man, the spotlight's on me now, and not at all. This tagline for this series is the gospel and mental health. And if you're new to church or any of this, this word gospel just means good news. Good news. And the good news that we want you to experience in that, as hard as that is to see and experience, and the emotions that it can bring up, is for you to know that you are not alone. You are not alone. I've felt that way before. The people that you're sitting with have felt that way before. We will feel that way again. And in the midst of that pain, that you are not alone. And we understand that that's a heavy way to start an already heavy conversation that we've been in for the last week or two here. But our hope is that if you're new to Grace, or you're still not sure what this whole church thing is about, or Jesus, or you've been following Jesus for a long time, or anywhere in between, our hope for you is that we leave here as people who are honest and open about mental health. And you don't feel like you have to sweep it under the rug. Like we sang in that song, that we're safe in the presence of Jesus. So again, if you're new or and we haven't met before, my name's Matt. I'm our Strawbridge campus pastor. And it's good to be with all of our campuses online. And we're in this conversation, this 3-week conversation on mental health called Under the Rug. And these messages really build off of one another. And so if you weren't here last week, I'd encourage you to go back and watch Eric's message. It was such a great way to kick off the series, and then come back next week. But I think today is going to be really good, and I think it's going to be really helpful. You know, I've been married, it'll be 7 years in June. And thank you, I guess. I appreciate you. Thank you for that. That's so sweet. Thanks for lightening the mood. That's great. My wife, her name's Jenny, and she very regularly tells me to sweep under the rug. It's one of my jobs. And I very regularly forget to sweep under the rug because there's a rug there. I don't need to sweep underneath the rug. There's a rug there. It's covering all this stuff up. But let me tell you, I checked under my rug a little bit ago. There's stuff underneath there. There's things underneath there. Somehow the dirt from my feet, which I was walking with shoes in the house, which I wasn't supposed to do in the first place, but somehow the dirt from my shoes got a mind of its own, grew legs, and walked underneath my rug. Now, let me tell you, if you have a rug that you haven't checked recently, you should go check underneath your rug. This isn't a mental health analogy just yet. Please go check under your rug, because there is stuff underneath there. Now, I've got two options. I could either pretend like the stuff underneath there doesn't exist and wait until it inevitably spills out into my living room. Or what I could do is I could check underneath the rug and sweep underneath it, clean it, and take care of it as stuff inevitably happens. And isn't it true that this is the way that mental health often works? We all cover the uncomfortable and painful parts of our mental world with some sort of metaphorical rug, right? Because the stuff that usually gets covered with the rug is stuff that makes us feel pain. Makes us feel pain. And I think at the end of the day, whether you follow Jesus or not, I think we all want the same thing: peace. We all want peace, that inner sense that everything in our world is right and it is going okay. And nothing makes one want peace more than when you are faced with things that rob you of peace. And maybe for you, it's a mental health diagnosis, anxiety, depression, PTSD. I remember when I was about a year and a half ago, and I was sitting across from my therapist, and she said, Matt, I think you have generalized anxiety disorder. I said, whoa, disorder. Never heard that word said to me before. And I went to a psychiatrist, and he said, yeah, I think your therapist was right. And this anxiety is low grade, but it's robbing you of peace on a daily basis. You might need to think about medication. And I was like, okay, whoa. And you're right, this anxiety is robbing me of peace. Maybe for you, it's a traumatic memory. When you walk past that place that it happened, and your brain goes to that place, and this traumatic moment has forever altered the way that your brain thinks. Or maybe it's just the scripts that we read to ourselves, the things we say to ourselves. It's the I'm not good enough. It's the I'm not worthy of love. It's the I can never get past this addiction. For me, it's I'm not good enough. And it's not this just generic woe is me attitude. It attacks me specifically in the areas where I care about people the most. Matt, you're not a good enough husband. Matt, you're not a good enough leader, father, brother, son. You know, whatever it is, we all have things that rob us of peace. And when that inner feeling that everything's right in your world is suddenly gone, we're quick to want to find ways to get it back again. And not all of those ways are helpful. Not all of those ways are helpful. We tend to throw these rugs over our pain, and not all of them are productive. I'll tell you the rug that I tend to throw on my pain the most, it's comfort. It's comfort. Whatever makes me feel good so I don't have to feel the pain of what's going on in my mind. And I think we chase comfort in a lot of different ways. So one way we chase comfort is, man, if I could just have more stuff, if I could just have more, then I would feel more comfortable. Did you know that the average home in America has over 300,000 items in it? Did you know that the average home size in America has grown over 1,000 square feet over the last 50 years? Although we'd say it's silly hearing it out loud, there's a very real part of us that believes, man, if I just have more, then I'll be comfortable. Then I'll be comfortable. That's one way. Some of us chase comfort through busyness, right? Especially like on our devices. Did you know that the average person will spend 7 hours online a day? 5 of those 7 will be on social media. The last 50% of us binge watched our favorite TV show for 3 hours or more this past weekend. For me, it was Magic School Bus, but I have a 3-year-old. Although there's a great, there's a lot of good with the smartphone and streaming revolution. I'm not saying cancel all of your subscriptions, but it's created this idea that we're more busy than we are. And there's more ways to numb, especially when it comes to our pain. Here's another common one. We chase comfort through pleasure and addiction. And sure, there's guilty pleasures, right? But then there's like addiction, man, like just pornography, drugs, alcohol, whatever I can take to really just override my body with enough dopamine and chemicals so that I forget what's going on in my brain. It's clear we've got a lot of ways to chase comfort, but the question that I've been wondering as I've been thinking about peace and mental health is comfort and peace the same thing? And I don't think it is. I don't think it is, because you have to ask, we have more comfort now than ever before, so then do we have more peace? And I don't think we do. 1 in 5 adults experiences a diagnosable mental illness every single year. 91% of 18 to 24-year-olds say that they're stressed out compared to just the 84% average. 1 in 3 American adults experiences depression at a severe level at some point in their life. These aren't shrinking statistics, they're growing. And we're still figuring out as a society how COVID has impacted all of those things, but it certainly did not help. And these aren't statistics either, these are stories. Those numbers are people. I'm one of those statistics. And a lot of you would find yourself in those numbers as well. Despite all we have, despite all we can do, the pleasures we have, we're no closer to peace. We have tons of comfort, but we have no peace. However, I believe that there is good news to be found. That's what the series is about, good news for you and for our mental health. And we've been in Philippians 4 over the last few weeks. And again, these messages have been building upon each other. And Eric took us to verse 7 last week. And we're going to be in verses 8 and 9 today. We're going to read from a guy named Paul. And we'll hear more about him in a second. But Paul, when it talks about peace and how to find peace, he says this: "Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put it into practice, and the God of peace," there's that word, "the God of peace will be with you." And I think there's a tendency when we read the wisdom the Bible has on mental health, as we kind of looked at again last week, to say that's really unhelpful. Right? Like, when I first heard this verse, I imagined Paul like in a suit and tie and like, yeah, just think about good things, Matt, and then you'll feel better. Well, of course, like I can't think about good things. That's the issue. And it's really easy for this wisdom to appear unhelpful when we rip it from its context and we don't know the story behind it. But for those of you who don't know, Paul wrote this letter in prison. In prison. He wasn't writing it in his office in an ivory tower. He was writing this letter in prison to a church that's struggling with anxiety and fear for their livelihood. And he says, "This is how I've found peace. And I know that this is how you can find it too." And he says, think about all of these things. The word think isn't like you just have these magical Christian thoughts that you pop into your brain for 1 or 2 seconds and then the rest of your day is gonna go better. That's not what he means when he says think. It means to meditate upon. Like the same way you put like a good roast in a crock pot, right? Like put these thoughts in your mind and meditate upon them. Think about them. What are the things that he says to think about? Well, I want to go through all of them very briefly just to define them. And the challenge with a message like this is each of these are a sermon, right? But we don't have time for that. And I think there's a underlying message that undergirds all of that, and we'll go over that in a second. But let's talk about all of these things for just a moment. He says, first, think about what's true. You know, when we think about anxiety and fear, for a lot of us, and I would include myself in this group, it's the tendency to think about what could happen. What happens if I get hit by a car when I walk out the door today? What happens if I lose my job today? What happens if my spouse leaves me? What if this happens? And the word true here means whatever corresponds to reality. Not what could be, but what is. So Paul encourages us to think about what is and to not dwell on what could be. He moves on and he says, think about what is noble. What is noble? This would be like, what does it mean to go above and beyond? I think about people who battle with and wrestle with depression and that feeling of like, I just can't get out of bed today. There's this apathy and laziness. And I don't mean to say that in a critical way. That's just, I know that's what I've experienced when I feel all of those emotions and I wrestle with all those thoughts. And Paul says, think about what's noble. Which means, what does it mean to just go above and beyond, to not do the bare minimum, but to do the extra thing? When you're wrestling with that, don't feel this pressure like you have to be something that you're not, but begin by reflecting upon what's noble. He moves on and says, think about what's right. The word in the Bible that this corresponds to is righteousness. It's this idea that God has a way that he would want us to live our lives. And we have a way that we would want to live our lives. And very often, more so than not, those two ways don't line up with each other. And righteousness is choosing the right thing to do, to choose what God would have us choose. So do the right thing. Then he says, think about what's pure. What does not have the stain of evil on it? Don't think about pornography. Don't think about addiction, lying, deceit, all of these things that are very obviously evil. Don't think about those things. And then he says, think about what's lovely. No pun intended, but I love this one. This is my favorite one in the list because I think it's the most neglected in faith conversations. For example, if you follow Jesus, even for a short period of time, it might be easy for you to think about reflecting upon a Bible verse that really impacted you. or something you felt like you heard from God in prayer, or a podcast that you were listening to. There's very little talk around finding the beauty of God in a tree. In walking through First Landing State Park and noticing the beauty of God's creation and experiencing God through that, or through poetry or a piece of artwork or nature. It's not scripture, but it is a way that you can experience the loveliness, if that's a word, the beauty of God. Think about what is lovely. And then finally, he says, think about what is admirable. What does it mean to do the self-sacrificing thing, the way of humility? What does it mean for me to think about putting others first above myself? He says, think about these things. Now, here's what, again, undergirds all of this, is Paul believes that the pathway to peace is not in the comforts we crave, in the feelings we desire. Now, all of those things are bad, but the pathway to peace is not in those things. It's actually in our minds. It's in our mind, it's in our thoughts, and it's in the things that we think. And someone like me, I'm like, man, we live in 2023. We've got access to modern psychology and therapy and psychiatry. And is there anything that's been done in the last 10 years with all the research that's been done that proves this to be true? And I think the answer is yes. I think there absolutely is. Now, I want to preface this for a moment. The next 6 or 7 minutes, I'm about to sound way smarter than I actually am. And for those of you who know me, you're like, this is not Matt talking, this is somebody else. And you'd be absolutely right. I've had the blessing, and I don't mean this sarcastically, to be in therapy for a long time, like the last 11, 12 years, and to have learned a lot that's been helpful. And I can remember getting this information and thinking, wow, I wish I would have known this sooner. And I've had the privilege and pleasure of going back to some of those people with this message and say, hey, make sure I'm not like leading anybody astray with any of this, because this has been helpful for me. And I think it really applies to what Paul is talking about. So we're gonna talk about your brain for just a moment. And we're gonna talk about two parts of your brain specifically. We're gonna talk about your amygdala and your frontal lobe, all right? Aren't you glad you came to church today? Everybody say amygdala. There we go. Everybody, all campuses online, say frontal lobe. All right, so your amygdala, you guys sound smarter already. This is great. Your amygdala has been people have called it your brain's smoke detector, okay? It tells you when you're in danger. It's your emotional memory center. It's where it stores all of your emotions. And then you have your frontal lobe. That's the thinking and decision-making part of your brain. Not the thinking part, that's your whole brain. See, I'm already sounding dumb. But it's the logical part of your brain, the black and white. It stores data for events and facts, right? This part of your brain doesn't fully develop until you're 25 years old, okay? And some of you who are older than 25, you're like, wow, now my early 20s makes so much more sense, right? I had half a brain. Give yourself grace, like lower the bar, remember? Lower the bar. Now, I wanna share a story that I think illustrates how these two parts of the brain work really well. And so Jenny and I were freshly married, like not even a year. We're in our first apartment, and she is making some lunch in the kitchen, and I'm in the living room. And if you think that makes me look bad already, just wait till how this story goes. And I hear her very calmly say from the kitchen, there's a fire in our oven. And my amygdala went nuts. I like jump up off the couch and I'm like yelling. I'm like, where's the fire extinguisher? Why don't we have a fire extinguisher? It was my job to buy the fire extinguisher. I thought that was a wedding gift. You were supposed to remind me about the fire extinguisher. And I'm running around going crazy and being the responsible one. And Jenny is standing in the kitchen like 3 feet away from a fire, just staring at a fire, thinking. And I'm like, this woman's crazy. I married a crazy person. She's not doing anything. I'm the one who's like freaking out, and she's staring. And I thought she was crazy until she closes the oven door and deprives the fire of oxygen, putting it out. And I'm like, that's pretty smart. It's pretty smart. And I thought she was crazy in the moment. Now, I know I've got amygdala issues, and my wife's got a great frontal lobe. Not something I ever thought I'd say on stage, but here we are, right? It's the truth. Now, here's what happens is your amygdala, your brain's emotional memory center, when it's like firing on all cylinders, it triggers your brainstem to send more blood to your heart, so your heart starts beating faster. It sends more air to your lungs, so you start breathing differently and out of rhythm. And it can trigger two different extreme responses, an adrenaline rush, or it can completely shut you down. We have a phrase for this. It's called fight or flight. That's what's happening in your brain when that happens, fight or flight. Now, God created this part of your brain. I don't want all of you amygdala lovers out there to think that I'm like trashing on the amygdala, okay? It was created by God because every house needs a smoke detector. Every house needs one. You need your brain to be able to tell you when you're in danger. But we all know what it's like to live in a house with a broken smoke detector. When it goes off when it's not supposed to, it goes off in the middle of the night. And like just real talk, like a lot of us feel like we've got a broken smoke detector in our brain. And that's what it feels like. It's just going off and going off and going off. You know, everything in this world, including our brains, is affected by this thing called sin, which all that really means is there's this level of brokenness in every fiber of our being, every molecule and every atom to the largest planets and stars. Nothing is perfect or as God intended it to be, including our brains. Now, what can happen when your amygdala is going nuts is it can actually completely shut down your frontal lobe. You've experienced this. Almost everybody's experienced this. When you look back on that panic attack or that season of depression or that temptation you gave into when you knew it was the wrong thing to do, and you're like, why did I do that? Why do I keep thinking that way? It's because your frontal lobe is getting completely shut down. But here's the good news, that you actually have the ability to turn your frontal lobe back on. It's harder to do. It's easier said than done, but it is completely possible for almost all of us, if not all of us. And you do it simply by noticing. Yeah, it really is as simple as noticing and beginning to notice things more and more and more. You can notice, hey, I'm anxious. I wonder why. And you notice the difference between that and how we would typically respond is that's curiosity, not judgment. You see, we all have feelings. We all have feelings that are just, we would say like, this is crazy, like I don't know why I'm feeling this way. Where we get in trouble is when we start to have negative feelings about our feelings. And we start to judge, oh, I'm anxious, why do I keep getting anxious? Why does this keep happening? As opposed to, hey, I'm depressed, I wonder why. And you just notice, and when you do that, you have already begun to turn your frontal lobe on. And you do this, you continue to do this by doing something therapists call grounding. And all grounding is it's just noticing without judgment. I'll give you an example. Something that makes me really anxious is flying, okay? I don't understand why we put humans in the sky. Doesn't make any sense to me. Russell, who stands over here, is a pilot, and I was going on a flight a while ago, and I was like, dude, tell me I'm not gonna die, okay? And he was super helpful, so thank you, Russell, wherever you are. But it makes me incredibly anxious. And so, but I'm married to a woman who likes roller coasters, and so flying's our middle ground. We just fly everywhere. And we have family out in different states, and so that's not important. When we're flying, I'll get to like the check-in counter, and that's when the anxiety starts to really happen. And I'll say to myself, I'll notice the most basic thing. I'll actually start with my name. I go, I am Matt Love. I don't say that out loud. That'd be weird. I'd say it in my mind. I say, I'm Matt Love. I'm Matt Love. Okay, I can feel the ground on my feet. Again, just noticing basic things. The flight attendant's handing me a ticket. Okay, now I'm walking down this tunnel. There's space between the walls and the ceiling and the floor. And there's a flight attendant who is in the plane, and she's smiling at me. And okay, now I'm in my seat in economy. And I can feel the armrest on my arm. I'm sitting next to my beautiful wife, Jenny, and my kids are going crazy. And, it's just noticing, and I'm telling you, I'm describing for myself what is a very anxiety-inducing experience. I'm not joking. Like even now in this moment as I'm doing that, I can feel my body beginning to calm down. All grounding is noticing without judgment what is. The way Paul might say it is think about what's true. Think about what's true. Whatever corresponds to reality. Think about what is noble, what is right, what is lovely. I'm telling you, this list that Paul gives actually has the power to change the way that your brain thinks and processes things, even the tough stuff. Now, if you're here today and you'd say, man, I don't follow Jesus and I don't know what I think about all this, glad you're here. But you might be thinking, Matt, this just seems like good advice. I thought we were supposed to talk about Jesus. And if you're here today and you do follow Jesus, you're like, Matt, this is just good advice. When are we gonna talk about Jesus? And I'm glad that you asked, because Paul was a Christian. His life was radically changed by Jesus. And the gospel, the good news he believed in, was not just good advice. It was not just self-help. And there's nothing wrong with self-help, but the gospel is so much more. John Mark Comer says, the difference between self-help and the gospel is in self-help, the end is happiness. With the gospel, the end is Jesus. Paul closes the verse by saying, and the God of peace will be with you. The God of peace will be with you. Not a feeling of comfort that is here one day and is gone the next. Not a fleeting feeling, but the person of Jesus, who knows what it's like to feel your pain, who came down, experienced anxiety and mental health challenges himself. The night before he went to the cross, the Bible says that he sweated drops of blood. He begged, God, if you could take this cup of suffering away from me, please do it. The sweating drops of blood is a medical condition brought on by severe anxiety. This is the God that is with us in our pain, who knows us, who understands us, and wants to, and has the ability to actually give you peace. He's with you in the pain and the suffering. He doesn't tell you, hey, put a rug on that. No, he says, take the rug off because I know what's underneath there, and I want to be there with you through it, and I want to give you peace. I want to give you peace. And here's where we get to the difference between peace and comfort. This has been like one of my favorite quotes recently. It's a quote by Dan Allender in his book on Sabbath. He says, peace is not an absence of conflict or tension. It is the union of distinctly different things into a whole that is far, far greater than its parts. Man, I want to read that again because I think it just succinctly says what I want to communicate. Peace is not an absence of conflict or tension. It is, in fact, the union of distinctly different things into a whole that is far, far greater than its parts. What are those two things? It's the good news that we hold in one hand in tension with the bad news, and we're real about both. Yeah, the bad news, like let's hold that. Like, yeah, I'm anxious, I'm depressed, I'm afraid, I've got PTSD, I've got these things that I'm dealing with. And this is where we would say like the Jesus follower worldview is not to sweep that under the rug. It's to acknowledge it. And we would say like, just let me affirm as the guy on the stage with a microphone, which I don't know how much that actually means, but it might mean something to somebody. Go get help. Go get help. Go to Celebrate Recovery on Monday nights here at Lynn Haven or Tuesday nights at Norfolk. Go see a counselor. Go talk to your doctor. If they feel like you need medication and they are telling you that and you don't feel a conviction in your spirit, otherwise, do what your doctors tell you to do. Be real about the bad news so that you can go get help. And then hold that in tension with the good news. That there is a God who loves me, who cares for me. He's created a good world with lovely things in it that I can notice, with right things, with noble things, and I can notice it. No matter how broken I am or this world is, that still exists, and I can see it and notice it. And what happens when you hold the bad news and the good news together is you'll realize something, that the bad news is temporary and the good news is eternal. And the good news lasts forever. Peace is being able to hold both of those, and to say, I see the bigger picture. There is a whole that is greater than the parts. I shared a little bit earlier, like generalized anxiety disorder, wrestled with it for a long time, and in a healthy place where I feel like I'm managing it better and it's good, but I was in a place 2 years ago where I was like, I'm worrying a lot more than I should. Like about things I shouldn't be worrying about, like who worries about taking a knife out of the dishwasher and falling on it on my way to put it away? Like legitimately worrying about these types of things. And it was starting to affect my work, my health, my sleep, my family, my relationships. And I had to go get help, but I had to be real about that bad news first. And that's hard. And I have empathy for anybody who's in that place that it's rough. It's difficult for men, for women, for young, for old. And this might feel like a little bit of a turn here for a moment, but I want to speak to men for just a moment. Because there's a part of, it feels like a message we get in culture is that what it means to be a man is to sweep things under the rug. And that's not what it means to be a man. It's just not. And for the men here who are experiencing that, I don't want to come at you with guilt or wisdom that I haven't earned, but just a message that your Heavenly Father wants to give you peace. Not the type of peace where you sweep things under the rug and just push things deep underground so nobody else can see them because you feel like you have to protect everybody. No, none of that. Where you can bring that up. You can take the rugs off. Because really those rugs are going to eventually hurt the people around you more so than you realize. And be honest with the people around you that God has put in your life. Be honest with Jesus and you experience freedom and you experience peace. Again, men, women, young, old, we can all experience peace in our lifetime by taking off the rug and thinking about what is true, noble, right, pure, lovely, and admirable. Here would be my challenge to you today, and I'll say this really quick. Tomorrow's Monday. We've got 6 more days in the week. Set a reminder on your phone for tomorrow and think about what's true. Think about what's true. When you notice yourself thinking about what could be and the fears, just give yourself grace, no judgment. Hey, my mind's going this way, but I'm gonna bring it back here. And if you have to do it 1,000 times, that's 1,000 opportunities for you to think about what's true. Then on Tuesday, set a reminder. Think about what's noble, what is right, what is pure, what is lovely. Friday's gonna be a great day. The weather's gonna be great, and there's gonna be opportunities to experience the loveliness of God and nature. Saturday, think what's admirable. And then hopefully when you're sitting in these seats again, when you're watching online again, how do you feel? Check in with yourself and give yourself grace to know that if you don't feel perfect or completely at peace, that's okay. Again, think about these things. It takes time. It takes time. And then if you want to go above and beyond, I would encourage you to go to Celebrate Recovery on Monday nights here at Lynn Haven or Tuesday nights at Norfolk. I'll be here with you on Monday night. I got to a place recently where I was like, I should probably go. I've been here like professionally for my job. I was like, I should just go. So I would love to see you here on Monday night or Tuesday nights at Norfolk. We can find peace by taking off the rug and reflecting on what is good, true, and right in this world. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, you are so good and we're so grateful for you and that you are the God of peace. And God, we don't always understand. I don't understand how this all works. Sometimes I think you're too slow. Sometimes I think you're not doing things the way that I would do them, but God, I'm so grateful that you are above it all and that you see it all and that you have so much wisdom for me to learn and to grow in. So God, help me and help us to fight for peace in our thoughts. We love you. We give you all the praise, all the honor, and all the glory. In your Son's holy name, amen.